but like a lot of times as a stroke survivor, like you have more than what you think you have.
Welcome to the Strokecast. A Generation X stroke survivor explores rehab, recovery, the frontiers of neuroscience, and how to peel a banana with one hand.
Hello, and welcome to episode 109 of the Strokecast. Longtime listeners may recall that I talked about the Neofect Smart Glove with occupational therapist Lauren Sheehan back when she was with Neofect a couple of years ago. You can learn more about the Smart Glove and some of the technology that's involved in that episode, which is over at strokecast.com/Lauren. While Lauren has moved on to other adventures, in this episode I revisit Neofect by talking with CEO and co-founder Scott Kim. While we do talk about stroke recovery and Neofect solutions, we get beyond that, and we also get into topics about the nature of running a startup and the decisions you have to make as the CEO, and the nature of the CEO's responsibility to recruit employees with disabilities. Now, I generally don't like to do long introductions to episodes these days, but I feel in this case a little more context may help with today's episode. First of all, the Smart Glove by Neofect is basically a plastic exoskeleton that you wear on your stroke-affected hand while you play specific games on an Android tablet. It has extremely sensitive sensors that detect the slightest movement in your wrist, in your hand, or in your fingers, and it translates that very slight movement into actions in the game. So, for example, if you can barely close your fingers in the real world, it may translate that subtle movement, that subtle twitch, into a full grasp in-game. And vice versa, when you go to try to open up a spastic fist, that slight motion that you can make will be translated into opening your hand in-game. Now, you see, the goal of this is to get you to make as much deliberate movement as you can and to let you see the result. And to get you doing it then again and again and again for those thousands of repetitions that we know we need in order to build new pathways within the brain. As you have this bit of positive action happening, the brain is able to see and experience success on screen, and now you have positive reinforcement for that movement, which will direct more neural resources to that connection, and of course, as neuroplasticity tells us, nerves that fire together, wire together. We also talk about 3 new things that Neofect is now doing. First, they've added some competitive games to the Smart Glove, so users can actually compete with one another as they continue to get better. Second, they launched a new telehealth initiative right before COVID-19 went ahead and, well, pretty much shut down the world, which in sheer coincidence turned out to be just perfect timing for them. And third, they've recently launched their own stroke recovery app to help survivors learn more about stroke and lifestyle changes to help prevent another stroke in the future. With that broader context in mind, let's go ahead and meet Scott Kim. Scott, welcome to Strokecast. I'm glad we're able to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a couple of years since the Smart Glove came out, and I talked about that a couple of years ago, and I'll link to that episode in the show notes. But, you know, we keep hearing about some of the really cool things Neofect has been doing since then. So, I mean, what have you been doing since then?
Since the last time, you guys thankfully covered us, and there has been quite a few updates and upgrades, and we came up with a new feature called the community games. The patients can actually play certain games together concurrently at the same time and using their own gloves. So, for example, one of the games is bingo. If you are the Smart Glove user and I am the Smart Glove user, then, we get into Neofect Home app and then go into the community games section. and then select the bingo, and then, you and I can place against each other, and you can have multiple users, more than two. So it's pretty fun. Like everything is like interrelated these days. And then people want to share their experience, like, whether it is, exciting thing or it is, like encouraging thing. People can play the games together and then they get better together. And so community games is, one major feature upgrade, like over the past couple of years.
Well, I think that's really interesting because it gets to some of that natural good-natured competitiveness. I know back when I was in inpatient rehab, they had the patients divided up among two or three different teams based on the therapists that were assigned to them. And I could say it would have been kind of cool to get to compete, have the blue team competing against the red team for scores through therapy on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, we definitely studied, working on this feature, based on the feedback from the actual patients as well as the actual clinicians. So again, back to the community games and back to what you said, it absolutely makes sense because it's not a secret. Anything that involves competition that really encourages engagement, which is our ultimate goal, always.
No, that's great. And, what I think is really really cool about it, too, is what it's detecting is, just the slightest motion in your fingers that you might not even see visually. The machine's able to pick up on that and register that and let you do something. Because ultimately, all therapy is about getting to do a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's you may not know, a lot of times, I mean, it really depends on, how severe the stroke was and, how much range of motion you have as a baseline. But a lot of times as a stroke survivor, you have more than what you think you have. So especially when you're given such tasks, then you try to make that happen. And then what's been working out really well is that, basically you are as a stroke survivor is relearning the process. And then they get the hang of it, they get the good sense of it, and then, ultimately they get better, with the practice because obviously, when it comes to stroke rehab, repetition is the key, and then we make the repetition more engaging.
It's one thing to do the repetitions on the program that the therapist outlines that I'm supposed to do, whereas when I'm sitting on the couch with, some of those just stupid general games on my phone and I'm just tapping the same thing again and again and again, that's repetition. And when I can incorporate that turn that into therapy, well, then we've really got a thing happening.
Mm-hmm. There are more than 50 games, just in the Neofect Home app. And then the patient wears a glove and then go through the evaluation. Based on the level of range of motion each patient has, the artificial intelligence actually, selects different games. Just like the Netflix already knows what kind of movie you want to watch or you have to watch. So we're trying to be the Netflix in stroke rehabilitation. So based on the progress that you're making, the AI-driven algorithm is giving you a whole different set. So each and every individual has completely different experience, out of trainings. We've been trying to fine tune the AI. It can capture the subtle differences among the patients. And another thing is kind of ironic because while we've been also working on AI, we also realized that AI will not be able to ever capture every detail of the patient. Personally, I totally believe that the need for therapy, therapists, that's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay here and it'll be ever increasingly more important. So, but ironically, we also realized that while working on AI, in order to meet the actual needs, there's gotta be some type of feature that enables the manual control. There's a lot of reasons. Some patients in the morning, they have better range of motion. And some patients, like, it depends on the mood. We actually, like, made a feature where, patients can just play around, like, to manually make it harder or easier.
As you're talking about that important partnership between any sort of AI powered product or solution, it's another tool in the toolbox of the therapist. And I think we're probably seeing that become even more and more important as we've gone through these COVID-19 shutdowns, and we've seen a lot of facilities just stop a lot of outpatient rehab because, well, they want to preserve resources and keep everybody from catching COVID. But, with a shift to telemedicine and a shift to other devices, it becomes an opportunity for patients to still get care even when they can't get to the facility and coordinate with a therapist over telemedicine or whatever it is. It's another tool for that OT or that PT.
Yeah, I agree. And then you talked about COVID, but COVID changed a lot of things. Like, I think, one major shift that we've been kind of preparing ourselves. No one knew what's going to happen, like in February 2020, but
that was like 30 years ago.
Yeah, right. And what we've been working on heavily was the telehealth. We've been working on making technology readily available for people who are not actually able to get to clinic, or people who want to get the therapy from the actual therapist, but who can't make it to their clinics. Like we actually launched a couple of apps. One is the Telerehab app that connects the therapist and the stroke survivors, so that they can actually do the remote therapy. Patients can be monitored on a real-time basis by the actual therapist. And the therapist can actually come up with different training modules for the survivors. Just because, going back to the previous point that, there's no way that AI can be smarter than actual licensed therapists. We kind of saw this, years back. So we started working on this feature. And kind of accidentally, we launched the app, which ended up being pretty timely. And separately, we also launched the app called the Connect, and that's for stroke survivors, education and then engagement, so that ultimately what we want is the behavior changes. Stroke survivors, there's a series of choices that they can make, even in a day. And then, but I think a lot of times, there is a need for better training, better education, and then, more engagement for rehabbing themselves. So, packing all these things in one place, we launched the app that gives a lot of tasks and reading on a daily basis for stroke survivors. And then that's been working out greatly, in COVID situations, because people have more time at home, and then people have more time, looking back, on their life, and then searching what they can do, just to improve their life. So, rehab journey.
Absolutely. And I think what's really important that you were talking about there was measurement, and using the tools to measure all these different range of motions, whether a therapist can use that to obtain, as you said, those objective measures, because that then becomes, especially in an inpatient context in the United States, that becomes really important for those ongoing negotiations with insurance companies, because often with health insurance in the U.S., once you are not making progress on their forms, then they're going to stop paying for therapy, and you're going to have to go home, even if you had more potential progress that you could do. Whereas a device that's taking measurements, it's not just that the therapist is saying, I think they are using their hand better. They can say that, yes, the metrics we have show a 10% improvement in wrist flexion week over week, and we're continuing to see that growth. And the more of that you can do, the more likely it is for somebody to continue to receive benefits. And then the other side of that too is one thing I always tell new survivors and caregivers is take a lot of pictures and take a lot of video of your survivor early on, because especially as you get 6 months, 12 months, 18 months and longer out, you're not going to see the progress in your day-to-day life because it's happening more slowly, but it's still happening. When you can go back and look at those videos, look at those pictures and see where you've been, now you can see a progress. And in a measuring tool, now you can see it in the charts.
Exactly. And I mean, I could 200% agree with your point. And measuring capability can do a lot of things. The last thing that you mentioned, and we've met, like in early days, like I was actually able to meet a lot of individual patients. It's exactly like you pointed out. And then in the device, like every range of motion that you're leaving as a progress, like you can track back as a chart. The data are saved in the app, so you can always pull the progress report and then see how much, how far you've come along. The thing is, I met quite a few patients saying that, I was expecting to achieve like a lot more, like within days and within like a week or two, but I'm not getting there. I'm frustrated. Then I don't know, any listener, even if they don't use our devices, even if like they use like any other devices, I really want them just to remember the importance of repetitive things. And then I hope that they are really engaging themselves with the repetitive tasks so that everyone can better, like any listener, like if you're listening to this right now.
Absolutely. It may take time. I mean, fans of Willy Wonka will know that I Want It Now didn't work out very well for Veruca Salt. But putting in the work and doing the effort, that's going to be the way to make it happen. And we talk about putting in work for long-term results. I mean, like I said, what was it, 10 years ago, you started Neofect. And so what inspired you to go ahead and build this company in the U.S.?
One of our friends, who came up with the idea first, and then he was in PhD program for engineering and neuroscience at the University of Southern California in LA. It was his last year, and he's our group CTO now. And he came up with this idea, and then, for me, it was also personal reason because, I was born with spina bifida. It's a type of disability you're born with. Thankfully, it was a mild case for me, so I had major operation on my back, but then again, I definitely spent special childhood, growing up in South Korea in early 80s. It's just lots of repetitive work, for rehabbing and just different childhood. Just growing up, I just thought, there can be better way than just forcing the people who are in need into this repetitive program. There's gotta be better way. Yeah. And then three of us met and then we talked about this idea for a month or two. And then the rest of it is history. We decided to just go for it and not look back, and then started from South Korea. Yeah. Came over to the United States in 2015.
So one of the things I think is really interesting about the way you tell that story, and it gets the way a lot of folks who have lived with disabilities have told their story. You just said, you mentioned having, growing up with spina bifida, and it was just a minor case that resulted in major back surgery, ongoing rehab for years, thousands of repetitive things, and you describe that still as minor. And that's something that I think is really interesting. Those of us with disabilities, we just start to see it as, oh yeah, it's just this thing, no big deal in some cases. But it really does shape so much of what we do. And in part, in your case, helping to inspire you to start this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just not only my own case, and I've been really grateful for every single interaction that I had with both clinicians.
So, as an organization, I know Neofect certainly works with a lot of clinicians and has a number of clinicians on staff and product folks. Do you, as a company, do you also then have more employees who are people with disabilities than what you might see at a typical startup?
I mean, that's one thing I like to think more out loud. And just, I mean, the short answer is not really. Like we've had, just including myself, we've had, some folks before, like who had the conditions and who have conditions. But the way I see this is, I don't know, like personally, like I've been kind of like blaming myself too. And I mean, especially over the past few years, like I kind of like changed my perspective in this type of thing. And I think I have obligation to more actively look for people in those communities, because there's a lot of challenges for people who are dealing with the physical challenges, especially like when they can fully function or function even better. It can be easily overlooked and where they are. And then even if they wave at people, then just they may not be given the like equal opportunities. So there's one organization that I support and that I really love about, like they're called the No Barriers. And I was very lucky to be invited like as a guest speaker last year, and they're basically an organization for people who are dealing with like mental or physical, setbacks. And then every year, everyone just gets together and talking about like what their experiences are and then how to overcome those, quote unquote barriers. And one thing I realized from attending that event last year was that I think it's not just being aware of the communities, but it's more like it's my responsibility. I mean, ultimately, like to be honest, like this is the business really that we're getting, like we're getting like financial help because like we have the customers, and then I really have the responsibility like to more actively engage into like that type of opportunities. So yeah, I mean, it's such a long excuse of saying no, we don't. But like honestly, that's how I feel about like this specific matter.
That's fair. I think what we're seeing a lot over the last few years is looking at this from, hey, there is something we can do here. Maybe there's an opportunity for growth, and maybe there's an opportunity to really bring more together. And, that's what we ultimately all have to do, is look at how we can grow, how we can, as a community, embrace all the different resources and skills and diversity that are available to us to ultimately provide better results for our own organizations and for the world as a whole. Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about all these things and all the stuff that the Smart Glove and these other devices do, ultimately dealing with these micro measurements, responding in software, are you seeing applications for a Neofect technology in the abled world, in the non-stroke world, people without disability?
Not in the near future, and not many people actually know, but we have tried and applying this to gaming world, and that didn't go well. I mean, there can be many reasons, and purely focusing on the company management perspective, like it was really hard to focus on like one single group of customers. I mean, every business like has one thing in common, like wherever they are, whatever they do, that is customer. Like every business exists because of the customers. And then we realized the difficulty of like having two completely different customer set. And then it basically governs a lot of things, like the way you hire people, the way you run the teams and things like that. So we tried, but it didn't go too well. So we didn't look back. And so like not in near future, no. And for now, like we're gonna be like strictly focusing on like patients with neurological conditions, but we've been branching out a little bit, more like for patients with spinal cord injury. Like we have a product called Neomano that actually opens the fingers, and that's for spinal cord injury patients. So we have that, and then branching out a little bit more, like we have like smart pegboard, like it's like a digital version of pegboard. You can place things, on the pegboard. And, that's been knocking the doors in education education industry. Like, we're sticking to what we are good at, and then what we already know, and then what we'd like to make huge impact on.
Oh, that's great, because there's like three important lessons in that right there. That's that first, when you try to focus on everything, it means you're focused on nothing. Being able to drill down on your focus. Yeah, exactly. And you can get stuff done. Also, I think the idea of, you said you tried it didn't work out, so you moved on. I think that is one of those things that's, that those of us with neurological conditions have to deal with as part of our therapy. Always have to, whether that's going to be trying to turn on a light switch with an affected limb. You got to try it. You got to keep trying it. When it doesn't work, then move on to your other one. But you tried it, you moved on. And as a business, you try it, it doesn't work. No need to keep putting money and resources down that drain. It's time to move on. And I think that stuff becomes really valuable. And then when you are starting to branch out in other areas, it's sort of a more organic growth, looking at, okay, this is what we're doing. There's a lot of overlap with spinal cord injury and brain injury. Where is that commonality? And in fact, a lot of the rehab facilities that treat for stroke and other neuro conditions also treat for spinal cord injury. So it's, in some respects, it's the same customer base, just trying to solve more of their needs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, thank you for like such a wonderful summary. And then it's so much better than me talking 15 minutes. And I agree. And it's like one thing that course of AKA startup life, what we realized that there are just so many different voices. Like when you are identified as, entrepreneur, and there are just so many voices, whether it be advice or, just heads up, or, whether it be like helpful advices or unhelpful advices, there are just so many people like talking about like different things, and then just telling you, oh, like this could be great, like if you did this and that. And I mean, we kind of like learn how to stay focused, and not only the ideas about technology. And now that we are public company, we went on IPO in 2018 in South Korea, and there's a lot of voices about the company. Oh, what about this? What about that? But over the course of years, we kind of learned how to stay focused. Ultimately, we kind of realized that this should be actually simpler than it seems. Which is, you want to go back to the core, and sort of you achieve the goal that you wanted to achieve. And for us, when we were studying, everyone was so negative about this. And I remember all those people who were just naysayers. And I mean, we were all discouraged and sometimes depressed, but I remember the old days, three of us were just saying that, we're going to give it a shot. And I mean, we happen to be students too, masters and PhD students. And there's no harm. Even if we become nobody, then, we hope that somebody remembers us, that, there were these guys who actually gave it a shot, instead of, there are these guys who wanted to try a lot of things and then ended up doing nothing. So we always wanted to remember where we came from, why we studied this, and it still really helps us to remain focused.
That's just a fantastic approach to be able to say, to quote Hamilton, we're not throwing away our shot. I'm reminded also of another entrepreneur, Jason Calacanis, made it big back in the AOL days, who works with a lot of entrepreneurs now. He's, one of the quotes I picked up from him was that ideas are nothing, execution is everything.
Yeah.
You can have hundreds or thousands of ideas. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if somebody steals your idea. It's who's actually going to execute it.
Yeah, exactly. That's, it happens to be something that I tell entrepreneurs. And I mean, sometimes I get asked during the interviews, or sometimes I meet other entrepreneurs in earlier stages, in Bay Area. It's there's no reason to hide your idea, because generally, like, no one's really interested in your ideas. And then even if they're interested in your ideas, like, no one's interested in your ideas as much as you are. And like, it's if it is like, if you're actually like less interested in your own ideas than others, like, then you've got a problem. You maybe like, you shouldn't do this. So yeah, like, really, like, idea is like nothing, and it's all about execution. I couldn't agree anymore.
So what are some of the technologies that you see coming up over the next 5 years or so that you're most excited about?
Generally, I'm mostly excited about power of AI, like, especially in the healthcare world. And I am interested in how AI pans out just because of all the reasons that the listeners already know, but also because of what's happening right now, like just COVID and then telehealth. I don't know, like, personally, I've never seen any drastic changes in terms of, like what CMS says, like in terms of the, like regulation and in terms of the way they handle the telehealth and things like that. I've never seen it like any bigger impact than this, than COVID. This is probably one of very, very few positive things about like COVID. It's just like, I feel like I get to see lots of things in healthcare industry, like mostly related to technology, probably like 3 to 5 years, like in advance than I thought it's going to happen. So I think AI can play a lot of roles, like diagnostic and, like setting all the, like detailed recommendations, like for patients. So I think it can play a lot of roles, now that, like just things are changing so fast, like because of, just because of COVID.
Yeah, very much so. It has been an amazing forcing factor in driving change in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
So if folks wanted to, we've been talking about the Neofect devices, the various solutions. If folks wanted to try them out, what would someone do if they wanted to try this out?
Yeah, like come to neofect.com, neofec.com, and then there are details like in terms of like how to contact us. And yeah, they can call us or they can leave the contact information and we'll get back to them within 48 hours. And whether it is like smart glove, like, or any others, products, then we're always like up and running.
Great. And if, and it's the kind of thing too, if folks are interested, they should probably also, check it out on the web and also go ahead and, if they're still in therapy, be sure to ask their therapist about it as well and see if they have access to some gear or some information, and can help them out as well. Take advantage of those therapists. They love it when you bring them ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like, thanks for pointing that out. And I usually like, that's the best setting. Like, that's the ideal setting that works out the best. Like, if they are already in therapy, then, just like, I mean, we have a lot of stuff in YouTube too, like Google or YouTube, like bring them like to your own therapist, ask opinion. They're the one like who knows, really well about, like their own progress, and then consult with them. Like, if they think like this is worth a shot, then, contact us together or set up a time, like, with us, then like the impact can be maximized, like with the licensed therapists.
Fantastic. And we'll have all those links over at strokecast.com/neofect. So you'll certainly be able to find those links and click through there and get more information. And that brings us to our hack of the week.
I want them to remember, like, every day, every moment, that they're not alone. There's a lot of like others like who are, in the same journey. And then generally it gets a lot better and more promising and more positive, like when they, get connected to others. So I think that's why the stroke support groups, or even, we do have the like Neofect stroke support groups, and then like it's so amazing to see the interaction there. And then people call themselves like warriors. And then there's a lot of, help going on, like, in the community. So I can only see the positive side of, like just, being able to open up a little bit more, and then just having the, like, we're not alone mentality.
Awesome. Well, Scott, this has been great. If folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
Oh, yeah. Come to neofect.com again, neofect.com. It has all details about our products and our team as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Scott. This has been fantastic.
Thanks for having me. This was great. Thank you so much.
One thing I want to come back to again is that Scott described his spina bifida condition as mild. It only took a major surgery and thousands of hours of rehab to work through it. Now, of course, I'm no expert on spina bifida, and maybe major surgery and thousands of hours of rehab is standard for what is a mild condition, which kind of terrifies me to think of what is a moderate or severe condition. But at the same time, I think a lot of us tend to do that, especially as we get further away from our strokes. We may start to think of our experience as milder than it actually is or actually was. It sort of becomes just a part of our history. Or we might minimize the challenges of our disabilities or our deficits so as not to burden others, or so others don't see us as less of a person as we try and live or maybe work in a corporate environment which may be more permeated with ableism. And sometimes we don't talk about it because of imposter syndrome, where we really wonder if this was a big deal. Is my stroke really a severe one? Is this that big a deal when I see other people who are quote unquote so much worse? Getting into the disability comparison game or the stroke comparison game is generally not going to result in a positive solution for anyone. And sometimes we might minimize it just because we want to put it behind us, or we want to only think positive thoughts to aid our recovery. Or who knows, maybe I'm just talking about myself. I don't know. When I do start to think that, though, and I do have those thoughts crossing my mind from time to time, I have to remind myself that, I did spend a month in the hospital, and you don't do that for a minor thing. And it has set me on this current path in my life, so yeah. I believe in focusing on the positive outcome you want. And more important than a positive mental attitude is, of course, an action-oriented attitude. An attitude of going ahead and doing the work and doing what you need to do to get on with your life. It's important to focus on your goals and not your obstacles, because you will hit the thing that you focus on. My favorite word is still the word yet, because I can't use my left hand yet. And I can't run yet. You hear how the word yet changes the meaning of that sentence. It's one thing to say I can't use my left hand. It's another thing altogether to say I can't use my left hand yet. You see, yet is about acknowledging the reality of today and planning to make it different tomorrow. And acknowledging the reality of today is something I don't talk about as much, but acknowledging that reality and acknowledging the reality of how I got here is okay. I mean, I can accept it and accept that sometimes it just really sucks. The thing is, we can't just wallow in it and the self-pity all the time, because our life is not in the past. The life we need to live is the one that is always starting now. So what I would say then is go start now. And as we wrap up this week, I'd like you to remind you to go ahead and visit strokecast.com/Scott to get all the links to Neofect and the other links that Scott mentioned. Please, when you get the chance, post this link, strokecast.com/Scott, to your social media accounts to share this episode with your friends, relatives, and colleagues, and maybe even some of your enemies. Follow me on Instagram at Bills_Strokecast for more Strokecast notes and quotes. And of course, as always, don't get best. Get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you soon.
The Strokecast, Bill Monroe, and Bill's guests provide general information and entertainment, not medical advice. Please do not make any changes to your treatment plan or the execution of your treatment plan without first consulting your personal doctor or medical team. The Strokecast is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.